let's talk a little bit about messaging to investors. It's important to remember, we've talked about the investor side. I'll give you one more tip. Investors typically want to be the last dollar in on any given round. So for example, if I'm an angel investor and you're raising $500,000 and I'm going to put 20 grand in, I don't want to be the first 50 grand because you could run for 6 weeks and then get no more money and I'm a waste. But if you've gotten 480, I would love to be the last 20 grand because I know that you've at least got a chance to meet your next milestone. So there's a perverse incentive. You want them in as soon as possible. They want to be the last dollar in. So you have to create perceptions, you have to create momentum, be a little bit more cynical, you have to create the perception of momentum. And oftentimes we'll end up doing contracts where we give them a little bit sweeter terms for being the first person in. People who invest in the first $200,000 or the first 90 days, first 60 days get some extra warrants on top. We already talked about doubling down, and that's an indicator. It's important to communicate, and that sounds trite, but there's an important couple things. One is you want to communicate not just the good news. Negative surprises will make it harder to get them to reinvest. You also want, here's a big mistake people make, you want to communicate with them regularly, not just when you need their money. You don't want to just come to them when you've run out of their money. You want to keep them engaged along the way. That engagement will create a willingness to invest again. Here's another sort of common mistake. It's important to remember investors are different than customers, and you need to message accordingly. Common mistake for a startup to make. Hey, we're two co-founders. She's the technical expert and I'm the marketing guy, so the marketing guy is going to go and give the investor pitch. The problem is I give the same pitch to the investors as I give to the customers, and they want very different things. To a customer, I want to say, our prices are so low, you won't believe it. An investor hates hearing that. They want to hear about pricing power and how high your prices are going to be. To a customer, I want to say, you can quit whenever you want. Investors want to hear about, these people could never get away from us once they start. So you want to make sure that another one is, to a customer, you say, hey, I'm in this for the long haul. I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Let's develop a relationship. An investor doesn't want to hear that because they're like, I want an exit, and this guy's never going to sell. So always remember that if you're having your sales team do a pitch, tailor it to the audience. Another experience point on fundraising is as you run low on cash, like we started fundraising, we left 3 months, it's ended up taking 6, we're starting to run out of money, so we're just going to start accruing obligations. We're not going to pay our lawyer for a couple months, we're not going to pay me for a couple months. The problem with that is if you're showing them accurate financial statements, which you should be doing, you will show that I'm out to raise $500,000 and I already owe $90,000. Now, I as an investor definitely don't want to invest, especially if I'm the first investor. Like, I'm just putting money into this thing that's already been spent? No way. So that creates kind of you get into sort of economic theory as to how that doesn't really matter, but in practice, psychologically, investors have a difficult time getting over that hump. There is a bit of a paradox. I talked about, obviously earlier stage is riskier because there are fewer proof points, also because you might have more money that you need in the future. But the paradox is angels invest earlier, so in theory, they should be the more risk prone. In practice, the opposite is true. They end up getting freaked out by all the things that you have to cover, and they want the most security. Whereas VCs, who are generally flush with cash right now, and are willing to invest if you can show them success. So even though they're later stage and taking less risk, they're actually more risk prone. So what oftentimes happens is companies will start by showing the angel investors a more conservative plan. Like, we're going to invest, but maybe we won't grow. We show them lower growth, but lower cash burn. And then once we've gotten their money and we've proven success, we take a more aggressive plan to the VC. It's important to note, those aren't necessarily disingenuous. They're just, you have different options on how fast you push on the gas, and angels want to see less, whereas VCs want to see relatively more. Caveat to that, you have to show angels there's enough growth and revenue to make this worth the risk that they're taking. So you can't just sandbag it. Large investors, especially VCs, will oftentimes give you only, there's also, this gets into the difference between a small investor and a large investor. A large investor, a wealthy investor, a VC knows that if you get into trouble, they can bail you out if they have to. So if I've got one company where like most people have invested 20 to 50 grand, and one angel has invested 500 grand, and he could do 500 more if he needs to. So he's like fine with, I'm only going to give you exactly what you need. If I'm a smaller investor, I'm like, look, if you guys need another 100 grand, I can't come up with that. So I'm more risk averse. I'm going to be more careful about your burn rates. Right. And we already talked about sort of the portfolio effect and how that means that investors and founders aren't necessarily perfectly aligned or imperfectly aligned, shall we say.